Something you may not know about Dan is that he served 8 years in each of the Washington State House and Senate. He also received the distinction of being listed as a super lawyer in the August-September 2000 issue of Washington Law and Politics magazine. Something you may not know about John is he earned a Master of Science degree in Management with 2 certificates in Change Management from Antioch University in Seattle, and formerly worked for an international consulting firm before he founded Because Business Resources 10 years ago. John will speak with us first about approaching the optimization of your business for succession and exit planning as a learning project. Dan will talk about how a limited liability company and trust can help to minimize taxes and risk in the sale of a business and for passing assets to your heirs. There will, of course, be an interactive opportunity for us today. Welcome, John.
We can start with a quick readiness test. Quiz. To get a picture, Gary, could you? Sure. So let's just go through this for a moment.
Thanks, John.
We'll spend 1 to 2 minutes and just go through it. It's a lighthearted quiz. And if you're just starting or envisioning a business, you could put down what you would like to see. Because there's a couple of us who are between projects, it sounds like.
Number 8. Last option.
Yes, Dan. I'm applying our lunch conversation yesterday. Okay. You can continue filling that out. Now what? We all create learning projects. We buy a new cell phone. We get a new app on that cell phone. We're working on our computer and we're attracted to a new piece of software. We read a book, we take a class, we start a hobby. We have learning projects all the time. That's all we seem to be doing is learning and adapting to the new technology, the new world order, the new economy, all these changes, these cultural changes, and business changes, economic changes. So we're all deeply involved in learning and growth. If we were to use a learning project, that model, for our smart exit, we would do better. We would do better in the beginning to start the project, the Smart Exit project, and we would do better as we go along in growing and scaling up the venture, and we would certainly do better at the conclusion. Now, the closure rate of small businesses, you all know the numbers, it's 80% or more in the first few years of operations. I believe that one of the fundamentals is there is such a focus on the startup and the revenue growth. The startup in the first stage, and then as soon as the business is launched, well, what do we do after the first year? We compare the current year with the last year. How are we doing this year compared to last year on a month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter, and annual basis? And if our revenue isn't going up every year, we kind of hold our heads. Well, what's wrong? And then there's these anomalies, you know, the economy that occurred in 2008 and 9 and 10 in that area, where everybody's business hit a slump. And now it's coming up and we're like, oh good, it's coming back. And there's such a focus on top line that it's not driving those numbers. Now if it's a bigger enterprise, publicly traded, well it's even much more intense. It's the quarterly earnings report that every publicly traded company has to report. So I want to propose instead that we approach our enterprises from a little more lighthearted approach, that it's a learning project. Because if we approach it from a learning project, what is a learning project after all? When we start any new book or class, we have to commit that we're open-minded, that we have something to learn, that we don't have all the answers, and that we're curious, and that this is something that may bring us new opportunities. So by the very nature of making it a learning project, we open ourselves. Many entrepreneurs are so focused on the startup and the year-to-year growth that we become closed-minded to anything other than that, because we have to have certainty. To be entrepreneurs to begin with, we have to be a pretty audacious. You know, we have to be certain of ourselves and our abilities, even when we're not. We have to look good, and we have to have the answers for our employees, for our customers. If we're not strong and confident with our customers, then, you know, they're going to wonder and maybe not do business with us. So, if instead we approach things from a learning perspective, from an open and curious perspective, it opens us up. And it also opens up the opportunity for innovation and creativity. Now, there are a number of management tools that are used in exit planning that I say have value at any stage of the business. Having a buy-sell agreement. Now, most businesses, it starts with one person with an idea, but they have to find some close friend, somebody, some relative, some fool who will look them in the eye and say, that's a great idea. Somebody has to be there facing the entrepreneur to affirm the entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur will say, oh, no, not crazy. So all businesses start really with two people, and then they multiply as they convince other people. Now, in most cases, those other people aren't, quote, legal principals in the business, although in many cases they are. So, right from the beginning, it's very important, if there is somebody who's involved with you who isn't necessarily a spouse, and even then it may be good, to have a buy-sell agreement, to have a clear way out. Because venture capitalists are among the shrewdest of us entrepreneurs, and they won't go into a deal without a clear path on their way out, the rate of return they're going to get, because they're not going to go into it unless they're getting substantially better return with lower risk or equal risk, comparable risk, than if they put their money in the stock market or into real estate or some other safer asset-based venture. So they demand a clear way out, and I want to propose that we are all venture capitalists. And if you're not a venture capitalist, you need to start thinking like a venture capitalist to safeguard your money so that when you leave that venture, you've got money to take with you to put into the next venture. Some of these smart exit tools, as we started, is the buy-sell agreement. Just having some kind of written agreement of how the conclusion might work out. Because one person inevitably is going to have some kind of need arise. They're going to need to move out before the other person. So this isn't going to last forever. A lot of people, they'll say, we love each other. We love this business.
Oh, yeah.
Why would we ever need a buy-sell agreement? We're going to do this forever. Yeah, right. I hope not. Another is having a business valuation for your venture now, and then anticipating what it's going to be in the future. Have a target business valuation. Now, you can have a business valuation done by a CPA, by a certified appraiser of businesses, or you can work with a formula that you can research for your industry. For example, pharmacies have a typical $5 to $10 range for each prescription. You take the number of prescriptions in a year, you multiply it by $5 to $10, depending upon the location and other factors, and that's the value of the business. Now, that doesn't include any of the accounts receivable, it doesn't include hard assets, it's just the value of the prescription part of the business. In the newspaper and magazine business, it's based upon circulation and advertising. A next factor is having cash flow to debt ratios that you can analyze. It's good to have a profit and loss statement, of course. You have to have a profit and loss, you have to have a balance sheet. But you have to know how to read them. And you need to know, are your figures accurately reflecting your true costs? When we're in business, we always end up buying things, and we end up buying things with cash or with our personal checkbook or personal credit card or debit card, and sometimes they get put into the business, and many times they don't. So there's a lot of costs and expenses in business that may not be reflected, or vice versa. Which is probably more for you. There's this color TV that I'm going to use in my office. Well, by golly, I did use it, and then I moved it into my bedroom. And so there's a lot of business expenses that are really not truly business expenses. And these things distort the financials of the profit loss in the balance sheet. But a cash flow analysis, when it's compared to debt on an ongoing basis, can be a litmus test to know really where the business is going over time. Now, making a smart exit requires several significant shifts in our understanding and in the way in which we approach our business and our activities. Because to be a successful smart exit practitioner, you have to first make the business operate whether you're there or not. Now, that is a huge stretch for most entrepreneurs, who are the brain behind everything, and they hire people who basically are their assistants, and they tell them all what to do, but they don't give autonomy, they don't give individual responsibility for particular departments, typically until a firm reaches at least 10 to 20 employees. The second is identifying someone with potential who has proven their ability, that they show the potential or they actualize the potential that they can manage and run the daily operations. Now, does that person have the ability to then be trained to become a business owner? It's one thing to know how to open the business, conduct sales, even make payroll, and there's another between being a business owner. Ongoing staff training is another factor, that if you engage with your employees in a collaborative style, then you'll create an environment that is positive and healthy. And out of that, when you identify that new leader, you're training the staff and you're training the leader how to be in a learning environment, a collaborative environment, to help that new leader in training to actually become a leader as you gradually step away, A, from business operations, and B, from leadership in general, and let the new star become the top performer. If demonstrate this kind of collaborative approach, then you're able to move to the next step, which is possibly doing stock option and a small amount of stock sale to the manager in training with a buyback that you can buy back and see whether the person performs as a minor partner. So at any stage and at any age, it's not good to wait until you're 60 or 70 to start your exit plan. In the same way that it's not good to wait until you're 60 or 70 to start your estate plan, as Dan's going to discuss. Any age is a good age to start, and actually the earlier you start, the better. Because like a car or a house, a business that's well maintained is a pleasure to operate now. It's worth more money, and it's able to be transferred at any time the need or the opportunity arises. So any learning project is a good way to use. So right now, think of some learning project that you've been involved in lately that's caught your imagination, and compare that with how you might use that model, that methodology, that spirit with your exit plan. Your smart exit can be a celebration of what you've accomplished, and you giving an opportunity to an employee, a person who would never be able to afford to buy the business. You can give them the opportunity to gradually learn how to run it, and for a small amount of money, you let that person buy into the company, and then you have the company buy back your stock. So that person can come in with little or no money down, just enough that's going to pinch them if they were to walk away. You want it big enough that they're not going to walk away from it, and yet small enough that it's not going to cripple them. And now, Mr. Marsh will talk about LLCs and using trusts as vehicles. Yes, Gary.
Just a side note, one of the things that I see, especially in local business, people who are new in the business or who, are starting their own businesses that tend to start what I call exit businesses, which is, they may think it's a great idea, but they haven't gone out and tested to see if there's really a market for that business, so that, the services or products of that business. And then they, struggle because they can't push a good product, it's not moving. And so, but I know you haven't talked about that, but that seems to me, from my experience with our group here, over the years, is people going out and starting a business that may not have a market in this locality. But I've never heard anybody really addressing that.
Eric Rees has written a wonderful book called The Lean Start that talks about having a minimum viable product, the very smallest model of your concept, the very smallest, and testing it with A/B testing. You have two versions that are next to each other and they're virtually identical. And you try both, like a flyer. You send out two flyers and you see which gives you better results, better response. So by testing a project like that, you can accomplish what you're talking about without building a fully featured project and only find out that your premise is faulty. Eric Rees, The Lean Start. Mr. Marsh.
Gary's passing out an outline, and thank you, Gary, on the topics that I'm going to touch on today. There are many forms of business ownership, and some are better than others in passing your title when you decide to retire or you pass on to the great beyond. The choice you make in the form of leadership, the choice you make in the form of business organization is going to affect the ease of your transition. It's going to affect taxes. It's going to affect your retirement options. So I would agree with John that in the very beginning, it's helpful if you decide what form of business you're going to do. I think operating as sole proprietor is highly risky, and it's better to start out with a limited liability company, perhaps a corporation. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit today. There are a number of ways that businesses transact themselves and pass their ownership. There are internal transactions. Internal transactions involve management buyout, employee stock ownership program, or sale to a partner. There are third-party transitions, which John deals with as a great deal. A sale to a financial buyer, or strategic buyer, or joint venture. And there are transfers to family members. And I'm going to touch particularly on passing on your business, Sue.
John, I'm sorry, I think I'm in the wrong section. What section? Are you just giving an overview, or what section are you
I'm in section B.
B, okay, that was B, okay, thank you.
Right, I'm just kind of outlining the first couple sections, and then I'm going to try to give some examples
Oh, okay.
in the next several sections.
Could you repeat A? I missed the first 1, 2, and 3 in A.
Yeah, A is ease of transferring ownership,
Ease of transferring ownership, okay.
taxes,
Taxes.
and retirement options.
Thank you.
And I was just finishing up on B3, transfer to family members.
Okay.
That can involve gifts, sale or inheritance, and it's a booby trap for many parents who have several children. The biggest mistake that I see parents making in passing on their business to the children is say, well, I love you all, so I'm going to give each of you an equal share in business, when only maybe one or two of the 3 or 4 children work in the business. If you do that, you say, I give you equal share in the business, and only 1 or 2 work in the business, it's almost certain that business is going to be in that 80% that John talked about. It's going to fail within a matter of a few years, sometimes just in a year or 2. Because those working hard in the business resent working and keeping the business going, building it, and creating income, and having to share it equally with those who are not working in the business or are not working effectively in the business. So it's important, if you've got children, that you pick the one that's most likely may be able to make that business go. Ideally, that child is already working in the business. If not, then you need to find a way to bring him into the business and do what John has mentioned, and that is start training him from day one for management. Involve them as much as you can in management decisions. Make sure they get the right credentials. If it's a credential business such as a heating business, which might involve getting a plumbing license, electrical license, etc., and taking them to business conferences, so that over a period of years, hopefully 20, 30, 40 years, they will know the business as well as you do, and just can carry on without missing a heartbeat. Now, I like to use limited liability companies, and so I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and then I'm going to talk a little bit, if we have time, about using trust as a way of passing ownership. The advantage of a limited liability company is that it is easy to pass partial interest. But when you have a trust, as most of you know, some of you have limited liability companies, you have ownership interest. And maybe you start out and you have 100% ownership interest. And then as you go along, you sell or give or bonus a percentage of your membership interest to a child or a key employee. And that's an easy way of going. You always have that buy-sell. So if it doesn't work out, you get that interest back at an agreed price. taxes are important, and so you have to consider that. On taxes with the limited liability company, it's what the federal calls a pass-through entity. So the taxes that the business owns can be paid on your 1040, and you don't have paying double taxes as you do with the corporation. For the corporation pays a tax on its earnings, and when you get the dividends, you pay a tax on the dividends.
Right.
You don't have that with the limited liability company. So that's an extremely important advantage. And then retirement options. It's easier to start passing ownership interest to a key employee or a child that's qualified to run the business with a limited liability company than it is if you have some other type of entity. It can work with a corporation, you can give them stock, it works better with a limited liability company. Now, the limited liability companies have the advantage of the tax advantage that I mentioned, but they also give you the limited liability, and that's important. So let's say you goof up and you get sued and you got a judgment taken against you, the most that you could lose is what you have invested in that limited liability company. You don't lose your home and your vacation property and your cars and your bank accounts. It's just the assets of the limited liability company. So that's important. It's really useful in passing estate interests. If you own 100% of a company and you pass, the IRS is going to value your business at 100% of its value. If you only own a partial interest, then even the partial interest is not going to be valued at 100% of the value of the partial interest. It's going to be discounted in value, probably 25 to 30%. Why is that? The reason is you get a discount for lack of control, and you get a discount for lack of marketability. Now, I own a building with a partner downtown, and with that, it's in an LLC. The reason we've done that is that instead of the building being valued at 100% of its value, and my 50% interest being valued at 100% of the 50%, it's going to be valued at maybe 70 or 65%, and that's going to help me estate tax-wise. My total estate value is going to be less because I own the total taxable estate value is going to be less because I own it in an LLC. And that applies to, you can have different LLCs for each property that you have. And depending on the nature of the business you're in, I think it pays. Now, transferred in real property in LLC are very helpful. If you own real estate in more than one state, say you own property here and property in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and you own it personally, too.
Not personally, the LLCs.
Okay, but if you own it personally, you and your husband own it personally, you're going to have 3 probates because the only way you can pass title is through the probate. Now, if you have it in an LLC, let's say your property in the Midwest is an LLC and the property in the East Coast is an LLC, ownership interest in LLC is considered personal property. Personal property can be handled in probate in your domicile state. So you can have probate here, and all of your personal property interests in LLCs, which owns real estate, can be transferred because the LLC can pass title. And so that's a huge advantage. A huge advantage. A minimum cost for a small probate these days is $2,000 or $3,000. If you can say probate in several states, multiply 2,000 or 3,000 times the number of states you own property in, and if you own a lot of property, it's going to be much more than that. Particularly now, if you own property in California. California is the highest probate cost state in the union because they tax and charge probate fees based on a percentage of the estate. And that is something that you can avoid, having a probate in California altogether with an LLC. Now I'm gonna move quickly, and I think I haven't even got the wave sign yet.
No, you have about 10 minutes, and that would include a question and answer.
Okay, so I'm gonna cover just one more topic, and then we'll get into the question and answer period. I also like to use trust as a vehicle for passing title to the child or key employee. What you can do with a trust, you can say, I give child A an option to purchase the business. That excludes the other children. And you do an annual valuation, so when you pass, we know the value of that corporation. And that child, then let's say there are 3 children. The child who has the option can use that 1/3 gift, inheritance, to either finance internally within the trust or to go to the bank and finance for outside. Now, if you do it within the trust, what happens is the trustee retains title and collects for the purchase of the 2/3 over a period of time, typically 10 to 20 years. And over that 10 to 20 years, the 2 children who didn't have the option and the opportunity to buy in, they're getting payments from the trust, from the trustee, as they come in. And if the business, for example, doesn't do well, you gotta buy, sell, and it comes back to the trust, and the trust just resells it. So that's a good device. It works the same way with a key employee. With a key employee, what I like to do and recommend to my clients is that they get so much during their working career, they get bonuses, what in effect are bonuses every year based on performance. They get an additional percent or 2% of the business, so that by the time there is your death, the key employee has maybe a 20%, 30% interest in business, which can then be used as a down payment to get bank financing. So I think that's a good way of doing it. Every situation is different, and I'd be the last to say that one solution fits all situations. You need to have good legal advice, good accounting advice. Accounting advice is equally important as